submit, could you also ask them to advise you if they feel that the interviews can't be, you know, what, if they can't meet that window, what window they could meet, so that they don't have to say we can't bid it or something like that? Would that be reasonable to at least get input back from somebody?
Yeah, so I think the Monday and Tuesday, June 23rd, 24th would be enough time for staff to turn that around from the 18th to the 23rd.
Yes, and staff, where staff believes a critical thing to ensure that we're not discouraging any qualified consultants from proposing is to extend that the amount of time they have to submit from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. But within this schedule, we're providing them plenty of time indicating when the interview is going to be, so they should be able to plan their schedule accordingly.
Be prepared. Gotcha. Any other questions for Mike?
Do you have a list of who you're going to send this out to, or how are you going to disseminate this?
I believe that Gordon has gotten recommendations from various people. We will certainly send the RFP to those people, as well as posting it on the town's website. And there's also another engineering and architectural bulletin board, industry bulletin board, that we will also post it. So we're going to cast as wide a net on this as possible.
So again, I know that the CCAC committee has worked with staff over the last couple of months on putting this together, and Gordon's done a lot of work on that with you. So I think it's ready to go. Thank you for the corrections.
Question?
Yeah, so with the importance of this project and this RFP, as well as subsequent versions of this, would it be prudent to at least consider, with all due respect to the Almanac, running it in other more regional papers than just the Almanac? I know we run our ads, you and I have spoken about this before, that we might get a broader audience, and if you're putting it on specific websites, that's one thing, but if you want to get specialists in an area, you might want to broaden the advertising in some manner. It's just a suggestion.
Mike, aren't we already doing that via the publications and stuff?
Yes, and what we found, I mean, the design consultants, construction managers, architects, they are well trained as far as where to find proposal opportunities, and so actually very few people now advertise in the paper just because of the cost, and a lot of folks don't read the paper. So
So actually,
Okay,
we've
good.
had a couple of firms come to the CCAC meeting just to observe. They're just kind of following what we're doing, and the notice of a noticed meeting, showing up and just sitting and listening, watching.
Wow. Any other questions for staff? So now let's bring it out to the public. Any questions from, or any comments from the public on this item only? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close it, bring it back to council. Item number 20. Any final comments by council members? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I'll make a comment.
Oh, comment, hold, please.
Today I met with somebody from the town of Portola Valley who a few years ago built the Civic Center, and they had project managed that effort from within. The fellow who ran Public Works took on the project management, and she told me of all of the things that that at least she assessed in retrospect, that was one of the problems, because it just drove him crazy to do both jobs. He couldn't do it. I think this is a good decision to go out and hire a project manager to professionally manage this from outside the staff. They'll obviously work very closely with the staff. I think it's a good decision.
It's a good decision.
And I'll move that we proceed with the recommendation.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 21, General Fund and Obligation Budget for fiscal year 2014-15. Robert.
Actually, it's going to come to me first, and then we're going to kick it over to Robert, who's going to have fun with open gov this evening. This is obviously the one that everybody's been waiting for this evening.
That was
Full crowd in the audience, but I can't, like Lisa, just say we're all done. Here's a staff report. So tonight's presentation is going to involve a broad overview of the town's general fund budget via PowerPoint from me, and then a live walkthrough of the general fund revenues and expenditures by department using OpenGov, which is available via the town's website, by Robert. The information is presently available in a format on the website that can be accessed by the public, manipulated by the public, downloaded, you get charts and graphs, you can create your own PowerPoint show if you wanted to in terms of the town's budget. So for the PowerPoint presentation for me, I'm going to cover some major fiscal changes within each department. And like I said, Robert's going to go through that in detail. So some of the things that we've done this year that have affected the current year budget that are moving forward into the next year's budget. We increased the hours for code enforcement. That was to the tune of about $36,000. We had an allocation for emergency preparedness support. That was about $10,000 that was put into the budget. We increased maintenance at the park and in the town's rights of way. That was about $141,000. We allocated funding for the Civic Center Master Plan. That was about $105,000. We do have some of that matriculating forward for the environmental and geotech. So that'll be in the current year's CIP, which you'll see on June 4th. This is just, again, general fund operations and expenditures. And then we had a contribution to other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. That was $2 million. And we'll see that in Robert's presentation. That makes a huge impact in many ways, both in the current year budget as well as the forecast for the next year's budget, as we actually reduce our operational expenditures by about $140,000. Technology tools, I just love it sometimes. Hit the wrong button and away you go. So in fiscal year 14-15, we're projecting about $11.6 million in general fund revenue and $11.5 million in general fund expenditures. This projects a year-end positive balance in the general fund of about $8.7 million and a single year revenue surplus of $138,000. That's without inclusion of the parcel tax and without inclusion of ERAF, which I'll speak to in just a moment. So you look at the chart, and that's how it looks moving forward. You've got the budget, the estimated budget, and the fiscal year 14-15 budget, revenues to expenditures. And that's without ERAF again, and without the parcel tax. ERAF, in prior years, as the town looks at its fiscal picture, we've included ERAF as an operational cost. Moving forward, we're recommending that we not. When school district, well, let me back up. Excess ERAF has traditionally been a component of our operational expenditures. The receipt of it fed our bottom line. ERAF is a long story that dates back to the 1990s when the state augmented its budget by shifting property tax revenues from local government into its general fund in order for it to offset its expenditures under SB 90 to schools. It freed up their general fund for other obligations. It basically stole money from local government and used it for state purposes. When school districts, however, receive enough revenue from property taxes to meet the state's required minimum funding level, the state's general fund is off the hook, and the excess property taxes return to the local agencies from whence it came. There's only 3 counties in the state that actually get excess ERAF. That's Marin, Napa, and San Mateo. The town of Atherton is one of the communities that receives excess ERAF. But every year, as the state goes through its budget process, it targets excess ERAF and trying to figure out a way to keep that revenue in the state's coffers. It's doing so this year. It's done so for the last 10 years plus. So staff budgets very conservatively. We received ERAF in 13-14 fiscal year of about $1 million. We budgeted $700,000. We expect to receive $1 million plus next year, but we're only budgeting $700,000. And we're recommending that we take that out of our operational line so that we're not dependent upon it as we look at our general fund operational expenditures. It's very unreliable, and so we shouldn't be paying money. Any questions on that particular item moving forward? The other is the parcel tax. The parcel tax is collected and segregated into a separate fund as required by law. Each year, based on city council adoption and allocation of the parcel tax, we allocate 60% of the town's revenue from the parcel tax to offset expenses related to the police department. That's 1.116 revenue transfers right into the town's general fund below the line. So we calculate our revenues and expenditures, and then we transfer in the parcel tax to offset those general fund expenditures for the police department. And then the rest of it, the 40%, goes to capital projects. When the parcel tax was adopted, it was adopted with three priorities. Number 1 being police services, the funding of police services. Number 2 being streets, and number 3 being drainage. So the town is supposed to, every year, analyze the parcel tax in terms of those 3 items and then determine whether you need it or not. So you take a look at our operational expenditures. You're supposed to do that after we've factored in all of our revenues and expenditures into the general fund. Then you look at the parcel tax, do we need it or not, based on those 3 expenditures. So you look at it now, we're getting 11.5 million and we're spending 11.4. So we have a surplus of 137. Do we need the parcel tax within the general fund to fund police services? The answer is no. So you go down to the next priority. How about for streets? Well, yeah, we have capital projects for streets. How about for drainage? Well, yes, we just did a drainage master plan that says we have anywhere from $2 to $20 million worth of needs in the drainage area. So yes, we need the parcel tax. This year's budget also proposes 2 additional sworn staff in the police department. So we currently have a sworn staff of 19. We're proposing we add 2 more officers. That's already included in the $137,000 surplus.
Oh,
Whoops,
you
I'm
already-
forward one.
yeah,
Let me go back one.
yeah.
So staff's recommending that we, in order to identify a clear need for those 2 additional police officers, that's about $350,000 worth of cost. So that's about 20% of the parcel tax. We can clearly connect 2 new officers, supplemental police services, 20% of the parcel tax. Make those connections, move forward, and the rest of it move into the capital projects budget solely for the next fiscal year. And the next fiscal year at the June council meeting, you go through this whole exercise again. What are our needs? What are our revenues? What are our expenditures? Are we meeting them within the general fund operations? If we are, then you allocate the parcel tax accordingly based on need, to items 2 and 3, which are streets and drainage. If you need it for police services, and to offset the police services budget next fiscal year, then you reallocate it and you switch it back. You do 30% or 40% of police services, or you go all the way back to 60. Or in any given year, we could lose a segment of property tax or something. You could allocate 100% to police services. It's a flexible allocation, but you do it every year. That's that component. Any questions on that one?
No.
I have a question. Okay, so, based on the budget, we would have a $137,000 surplus above the line, and
Yes.
that includes the 2 new officers.
Yes.
Okay, and the proposal of staff is to supplement the current police budget by adding 2 additional sworn officers, which is about $350,000, so that's how you came to the 20%. I know that there is a perception among some residents that the parcel tax, rather than the parcel tax being something that the council needs to decide the percentage allocation between streets, drainage, and police every year, that the perception is that 60% was to go to support police services, 40% to drainage and streets. Has staff looked at what, another $700,000 of the parcel tax would be allocated to in the police if in fact we decided to stick with the 60%, 40% allocation rather than go to the 20%?
Well, as you look at it, I kind of explained this to someone in an email. You've got general fund is our checking account. So you got $10 in your checking account. Your special parcel tax revenue is a special fund, and you can only allocate that to rent. Let's say you get $1 in there and you get $10 in revenue. You gotta spend $10 every month. What we're doing is we're taking the $1, we're moving it into our checking account to offset the cost of police services and paying our $10. At the end of the year, we still got $1 left. So that's basically what we're doing. So if we move $700,000, it ultimately becomes surplus.
I understand that.
Yeah. So if we added
But you haven't looked at
$700,000.
what the other, if we stuck with that
Mhm.
mechanism, you haven't looked at what the other 40% would be, it sounds like it. The 20% allocation to, relating to the 2 new officers makes plenty of sense.
Mhm.
And the only question is whether you happen to look at, well, what if you stuck with 60%? Is there another $700,000, which would be another 40%,
Mhm.
that would make sense to
Well, it
define?
would, unless you added more than those 2 officers,
I'm not
then you'd
suggesting.
purely be supplementing the existing police services budget, and it would trickle out the other end as surplus. And you'd have less to capital projects, but you'd have more in your surplus that you could use for anything you want.
Right.
Question.
Through the chair.
Please.
So maybe I can just add a little bit of perspective about the parcel tax and the 60-40 split and everything.
Great.
I think I'm not only the eldest council member of these three young men, but the oldest council member who has worked on 3 parcel tax measures. 2005, when it was Measure W, we had t-shirts. Marion Oster, Phil Lively, and I, we had Measure W. And we went out and door-to-door walking and got the parcel tax passed for police services, drainage, road repairs, those 3 items. There was not a 60-40 split on that at all at that time. It was just, we needed it for our budget. And then in 2009, when we really needed, it was 2 measures, S&T, so we did publications, S&T. Did you know that for Atherton's police, that Atherton's police force responded to 12,800 calls last year, and we have 10 schools, and public works and disaster preparedness. And then again in 2013, just last year, was Measure X. Okay, so I've worked on 3 of them, and it's all for police, safety, road repairs, and public works. The 60-40 split, there was a time, I think in 2007, coming to council meetings, where 100% of the property tax revenue went to capital improvement projects. Not 1 penny went to police services, because we had cut police services so drastically over those previous years that was the objective of the council. And I remember sitting in the audience, I thought, wow, anyway, so that there is precedent of allocating more funds to capital improvement projects. The 60-40 split came when we were in a budget crisis in 2008, 2009, 2010, when we wanted to make sure that we supported our police services at a level that our residents needed. And so we said, okay, we're going to we can defer some of the maintenance, we can defer some of the infrastructure. And so we want to give the bulk of the money from parcel tax revenue to the police services. We are in a really fortunate situation since last year because of actions that we took in 2011 with council members' leadership, Councilmember Dobby, Councilmember Widmer, and myself, Jerry Carlson. We made the tough decisions in 2011 to make some structural changes in our organization, and we've reduced expenses, and then a rising tide lifts all boats. Our property taxes have increased exponentially. The ERAF kept increasing exponentially. In several years ago, it was like 350,000, then it went to 800, 700,000. So when this came to me, I said, no, we can't do that. We campaigned. I campaigned on police services, 60% of the parcel tax, 40% for that. I can't. And I resisted city manager, and then he walked me through all of the facts and figures in our budget, and I've come to understand that this is really the only way that we can go and keep the transparency of our budget and the funds that we're receiving. And frankly, we have a lot of capital improvement projects that we need to devote some money to. So that's my little song and dance, my little pony show, but I understand, Vice Mayor DeGoya, what, your comments about that.
That was helpful.
So just a little bit extra of history, that it was in 2011, actually, that there was a number of citizens and others. There was a bun fight, so to speak, on money, because as the councilwoman has pointed out, we were short funds, and there was an insatiable amount of CIP projects. And so, and there was allocations and accusations by some members of the community that perhaps the partial tax was being misused, like for doing things in the park, et cetera, which was clearly not clear. So at the council meeting on the 7th of March in 2007, item number 5 was that we find a way to make a set allocation.
It was 2011.
2011, sorry.
As you said, 2007, right?
Sorry, 2011. So it was item 5, and the discussion was, originally the proposal was 1/3, 2/3, 1/3 for capital improvement. We changed it to 60/40, and then we recommended it, and it went to the council on the 17th, I think it was the 17th, 16th, it was the day before St. Patrick's Day. And the recommendation of the Finance Committee was passed unanimously. And the caveat in that was that if in fact the expenditures of the police department didn't need the 1.1, that it would flow down to the CIP program, and that allocation would be made towards the end of the year. And we also said in the discussions, and I think, Greg, you were in those meetings as well, we said that we would look at it periodically. It wasn't a set number, but it was being used, and it says in the resolution, primarily for budgeting purposes. So I think that the situation has been described by the city manager is spot on, that we don't have a need for the money per se, in this manner, except for where we're going to add on. And it's prudent to go ahead and start looking at some of these insatiable items that we've had, because our surveys and our plans have come through and identified many infrastructure issues that have been ignored for good reasons. We were short on cash, but have been ignored for many years. And we have, tens of millions of dollars that we need to spend. Plus, we have our off-balance sheet liabilities. So again, I think it's prudent for us to listen to, and take on the recommendation of the city manager here. I think it's very prudent, and thank you for making that recommendation.
Thank you, both of you, for adding to this.
And just to clarify, we can't use any of the parcel tax funds for off-sheet.
Right.
No, I understand that.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
want to make
No,
sure
but
that.
it offsets other general fund activities. Mr. Connors has made that clear to us.
Very dog-eared. George?
Those are funds.
So the next slide here just basically shows our revenues if we include the 1.1 million in parcel tax and the conservative estimate of ERAF, you get about 13 million in general fund revenues. But as we mentioned, we're talking about pulling those things out of our operational costs. So now I'm going to go through briefly the major fiscal changes with each department. Robert's going to go through them in detail. There's as much detail as the council desires using OpenGov. But the major fiscal changes in the city council department is an overall increase of about $50,000. 25,000 of that is actually on tonight's agenda for the audio-visual improvements in the council chambers. Those are transportable to the new facility once we bring them in. The other increases are some of these chairs are falling apart. I know Councilmember Whitmer actually pulled his apart the other council meeting or two ago. That's not kind of the best.
It broke on me, and I was going to have a workman's comp claim against the
could have been
town.
very expensive.
That's
So there's
You
chairs.
don't get paid anything, so you get no workman's
They're
comp.
relatively inexpensive. The two bathrooms are going to need some repainting and a little bit of refurbishing.
Maybe
This
a
building,
mirror.
Maybe a mirror. These facility is going to be here for at least a year or two, or potentially 3. The bathroom behind me here has holes in the plaster and it's bubbling. Those are big holes in the plaster. That's not only a problem from an aesthetic and cosmetic perspective, but it's a health issue when you're in the bathroom. We don't want anyone to get sick. And then the floors are moldy. And so Steve's going to come in and have the floors redone and we finished. Nothing major to them, not tearing them out or anything, just gonna vacuum them over. And then the carpet is gonna be looked at as well. We'll put the money in there for the carpet, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be replaced. We're gonna take a fine look at it. If you recall, we had carpet in the town hall, which we were refusing to replace year after year after year because we were gonna build these new facilities. And staff ended up having to duct tape over all the trip and fall hazards until eventually a resident tripped and fell. And I said, that's it, we gotta replace the carpet, so we just did it. We don't want that to occur in the council chambers, just gets a lot of public traffic, so we wanna take a look at that and budget for it just in case we need it. That's the only major fiscal change within the city council budget. The next one is the administration budget. That's me and Teresa. We have a decrease of about $4,000, or is that an increase, Rob?
Right.
But one thing I'd like to mention with the administrative services budget is we did add $25,000 in there for community support. I think we need to start building community and building community engagement, and we need to be doing that from the town. So I put $25,000 into the budget, and it would come back to the council, event-specific items, so the council could expend it and would have a place to do so. You know, bring back the day in the park, bring back other things in this community to spur community building activities. The next one is the finance department, overall increase of about $34,000. That's mainly due to technical services and software licensing updates to their Springbrook software, as well as some training. Then we have the planning
If I could
department.
ask on the Springbrook.
Oh, sure.
There is an item on the agenda today. Is that what you're talking about, or is it in addition to?
That's in addition to, correct?
This is
Rob?
in addition to maintenance on the technical services side, about $4,000 for Springbrook for maintenance on our existing module that we require certain special reports that they do for us, so it's for that. As we get into the upgrade, there is no major increase in the upgrade, it's just the big portion of it, as you see in the staff report, is for the training and having them come out here, because we already paid for the HR module portion. So this technical services is an increase for our maintenance.
But you can drill down on that within your open gut presentation.
But yeah, because we've been putting maintenance in every year, so this is a greater maintenance?
Yes, this is just a slight increase on the maintenance portion for us.
Thank you.
Then the planning department, overall increase of about $2,000, 0.9%. It does involve a decrease in housing element costs and a minor change in contract costs. Lisa and I are working on a negotiation for a contract that's coming back before the council. So this includes prospectively, potentially some of those changes. Then there is the building department, overall increase of $31,000. There's some Track It software updates that we incorporated into this year's budget. Did more digital archiving and an equipment replacement amortization for the Track It software package and equipment. As you know, equipment replacement fund that the town has is basically a depreciation account, so we put money in there, and then when it's done, we can replace it. Then we have the Public Works Department, overall increase of $154,000. Again, that is mainly related to the continuation of the enhanced maintenance, full year of the park event management, which is about $74,000. There's an offsetting revenue on the other side to that, but we have to budget the expenditure.
And the continued enhanced maintenance, that would also include the expert arborist,
Murdoch
garden,
department, yeah.
whoever it's gonna be, that's included in,
Yes.
so, okay.
Just at the
There's
park.
an increase.
Yeah, at the
No,
park,
just
at the park.
at the park.
Yes,
Same guy,
yes.
Murdoch
That's
Park.
a walk.
Yeah,
Same guy.
okay.
And the streets, and the halftime street and halftime park.
Spending $150,000 now.
Also, no difference.
Well, we did 115, and then then there was the extra money for the
He's rebudgeted.
34,000 on top of it, so you rebudgeted. And there's the tree that we keep trying to kill.
Then we have the Police Services Department, overall increase of $329,000. Again, that involves, last year, as you know, we added those 2 officers. We added them at mid-year, but they were ghost positions. We couldn't actually hire them. They were just able to recruit against. We're actually putting them into the budget as full-time employees for a full year of cost. Sir?
So one is an SRO, is that correct?
Well, we can allocate them however we like. If we want to do an SRO, I would suggest that we tag the schools, private and public,
Right.
for as much funding as we can get. But until we have those partnerships, maybe they're just another officer on the street.
Right, because my comment when I read the SRO, and I think one of the reports, the SRO would be moving around, he'd be at different schools at different times, and doesn't necessarily say that the incident that he needs to respond to is gonna be happening at that school. To me, it would be better that we just have a floater officer, and he could be the designated guy, but as opposed to having a guy allocated, but, you know, the chief and you have to make that decision, but it's a question.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. So we'll bring that back as an operational decision in
Yeah.
terms of
Please.
where we're gonna put him in
Right.
partnership with schools and things. We will
This is just
reach out and do
budget
that.
Yeah.
to an officer.
Yes.
Correct.
Right.
It also has reductions in overtime, temporary help, and reductions in OPEB contributions. The police department, since it's our largest personnel cost, has the largest OPEB reduction, operational reduction. And there's an increase in the workers' compensation fund where we have to build up reserves. And then we have, so our budget assumptions, but I'll let Robert go through those. Basically though, it's the two big ones. ERAF is treated as a one-time revenue below the line out of our operational. There's a reduction of our ARC expense, and then we are moving from 60/40 to 20/80.
Just a question. It looks like the reduction of our ARC expense is about equal to our surplus that we have in this budget.
Just probably a little more.
So
than
if
that,
we
yes.
had not made that $2 million payment last year, we'd basically have a break-even budget.
Pretty much.
Sounds reasonable.
Good call.
I didn't see a city
Good eye.
attorney's office on here.
The city attorney has no major fiscal changes. That's what it is.
City attorney.
He didn't make any money, he didn't lose any money.
Oh, look at this, he
Or-
wants some attention.
Or city attorney. All right, George.
So we have the five-year financial forecast, which, you know, in any five-year financial forecast, the first year or two, you might be very close. As you go farther than that, your estimates aren't gonna really count for much. But we're projecting similar assumptions going in the out years, and our revenues and expenditure lines will get closer, but in truth, they could be farther apart.
Perfect.
And that again is including ERAF, but not including the parcel tax. So areas of council feedback, I think I've already got on a couple. I've got the ERAF, I saw nodding of heads as a one-time expenditure below the line. The 80/20, I got nodding of heads, we should be doing that moving forward, adding the 2 sworn personnel, and then the consideration of an OPEB allocation. As you look at the budget this year, I would suggest, you know, we got $1 million in ERAF this year. Perhaps we could consider that as a one-time allocation toward that OPEB liability going forward. That would certainly assist in our offset. We're gonna do a refresh of that study that tells us what our ARC is, and we should see a reduction more than 137, 140,000.
Yep.
The last item that I wanted to talk about is the police services study that you see up there described. You know, we were in 2011 facing, as the Councilmember Lewis noted, a structural deficit problem in our budget. We did some restructuring, we've corrected that, we've righted the ship, we did some right sizing, but the police department now represents the town's single largest direct expenditure for personnel. Total staff of 34, the department holds 25, not including the 2 new proposed officers. So the restructuring in 10-11 allowed the town to right size. It did it, and it impacted the efforts of the public works and building departments, which are now contract departments. A reduction to the equivalent of about 16 full-time personnel and the elimination of future pension liability. The town's got a continuing responsibility to exercise prudent fiscal management and evaluate service models that can provide the same or better levels of service to this community. The town has achieved that success in public works and the building department contracts. However, there continues to be a discussion, sometimes on the council, many times in the community, about alternative service models and the merits therein for the police department. There are pros and cons that are certainly brought to the table in that discussion, and while the town may achieve financial savings, there could be some significant service level and autonomy considerations that you need to address in making those decisions. We're already continuously evaluating the benefits of alternative and shared service models. We talk about that all the time, sharing, you know, range masters at the range with Redwood City and other communities. We do that now. Where benefits can be attained through service delivery model changes or staffing changes, we will continue to initiate those changes. However, while the town has implemented distinct staffing or responsibility changes, we've never looked at an overall town-wide policing service model change and have a study conducted. Consideration at that level is a policy decision for the council. There's widespread community support for the police department. You probably see that in the audience this evening. If the town were forecasting similar fiscal changes to what you faced in 2010-11, I would say you've got a fiduciary obligation to at least evaluate that. But right now, because of the right sizing and the current revenue models, the town's forecast still remains positive. Nevertheless, if you'd like a study to be conducted, we would suggest that you do that next fiscal year in the spring sometime instead of an immediate thing. If you don't want a study conducted, we're not going to bring it back. So that's basically another area of feedback that we'd like from council this evening. That concludes my portion of the report. Robert can move into open gov, or we can address that issue as you see fit.
Can we address the last right now? Police services study. I mean, if
Feedback.
just feedback to you. I think that overwhelmingly we've seen considerable support for the police department, and I think that by evaluating alternative sources for the same service that we provide already is just not an option for me. I think that the town has spoken clearly. I think the chief has done a tremendous job and putting a standard on this department that's going to be very hard to match what we want as residents. So I frankly think that at this point, it's not something that I think of interest, at least as far as I'm concerned. Vice Mayor DeGoey?
Thank you for the report. I think it's appropriate that you bring up the subject and frame it in the way that you frame it. And let's deal with the issue the way that we all know that it's been discussed. This is the issue of whether or not the town is going to consider outsourcing or look at the costs and the detriments that would be associated with outsourcing the police department, i.e. going essentially to the San Mateo County Sheriff, as San Carlos did. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the residents in this town will not support an outsourcing option. Now, if we were challenged economically where we had no other alternative, maybe it's a study that we should look at. I believe that if we were challenged like that, our town would find the money to support our police department, as was done in 2011. But today, we're not challenged like that. We have the benefit of all of these properties that are being sold, scraped, and rebuilt, and that for the first time, we have a substantial surplus since Prop 13 passed last year, and we know that we're going to have that this year, and we don't see that going away right away. Now, we have to be prudent, we have to maintain the fiscal conservative decisions that were implemented in 2011.